He called me Mrs. Carter, with that same sweet voice I'd heard since middle school. But something in the way he looked at me that weekend made my heart stop and my thoughts go places they shouldn't have. This is not just a story about a weekend. It's a story about temptation timing and the silent ache of feeling invisible for far too long. If you've ever felt torn between who you are and who you used to be, hit subscribe now and turn on notifications. We share real stories that leave you thinking long after the last word. And let me ask you, have you ever felt truly seen? At the wrong time, by the wrong person? That weekend started like so many others, or at least, I thought it would. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 48 years old. And if you had met me 10 years ago, you'd probably know me as the woman who designed half the storefronts in downtown Savannah. But life changes, and motherhood, beautiful and brutal in equal measure, has a way of rearranging priorities. These days, I'm a full-time mom, part-time caretaker, and if I'm honest, someone who doesn't recognize herself in the mirror quite as often as she used to. We live in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Savannah, Georgia. Spanish moss drapes from the oaks like whispers. It's the kind of place where life moves slow, where your neighbors know the name of your dog, and the loudest thing on a Sunday morning is the choir rehearsing across the street. My son Ryan, 19, is a freshman in college and the light of my life. He's charming funny, and like most boys his age, just barely finding his footing in adulthood. His best friend Malik is 20 tall, athletic, soft-spoken, and thoughtful in ways that most young men rarely are. Malik has been in our lives since middle school. Back then, he was just a skinny kid with braces and a backpack too big for his body. But now, he's majoring in robotics and engineering at a state university, brilliant and focused. Over the years, he's stayed at our house more times than I can count, to the point that I sometimes forgot he wasn't actually mine. So when Ryan texted to say Malik would be spending the weekend again, I didn't think twice. I had groceries in the fridge, fresh sheets on the guest bed, and dinner already half prepped on the kitchen counter. What I didn't have was a single clue that this weekend would change something in me. Something I wasn't ready to see or admit. The smell of baked chicken filled the kitchen, and steam curled gently from the pot of mashed potatoes. It was the kind of evening that didn't ask for anything, just comfort routine and a table set for 3. Ryan and Malik dropped their bags at the door and made their way into the kitchen, talking over each other like they always had. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, glancing up from the stove. "Perfect timing." Ryan grinned, already peeking under pot lids. Malik smiled and gave a small wave. "Need any help, Mrs. Carter?" "No, you two go wash up. Food's 5 minutes out." They headed to the guest bathroom, and I let myself pause for a moment, hands on the countertop, listening to the laughter echoing down the hallway. There was something deeply comforting about that sound, like the past had folded itself into the present. When the boys returned, we sat down together at the kitchen table just like old times. The plates clinked softly, the silverware scraped lightly, and for a while, it was only conversation and food. Ryan talked about his econ professor, who always wore sandals with socks. Malik shared a story about accidentally welding a robot's arm backwards during a late-night lab session. We laughed. I laughed more than I usually did. The air was warm, familiar, like slipping into a favorite sweater. I didn't need to be anyone in that moment, just a mom sharing a meal, feeling the soft rhythm of family life that had become so rare since Ryan left for college. Dinner stretched on longer than usual, not because we were slow eaters, but because no one seemed to want to get up. The boys eventually cleared their plates, Ryan mumbling a quick thanks, Mom, as he and Malik disappeared down to the basement where the PlayStation lived. I stayed behind cleaning up slowly. I wasn't in a rush. I stacked leftovers into containers, rinsed dishes, and wiped the counters in quiet circles. Outside the window, the Georgia sky faded from gold to blue to indigo. The sounds from the basement drifted upward, video game sound effects, bursts of laughter, the occasional shout of frustration. It was all so familiar. And for a moment, I let myself just stand there, taking it in. No tension, no questions, just the soft hum of life moving forward. It was a peaceful evening, but peace, I've learned, doesn't always last. The next morning, the house was still and quiet when I came downstairs. The light through the kitchen window was soft and gold, the kind of light that makes you forget the time. Ryan had left early for soccer practice. He left a note on the counter, something scribbled quickly with a smiley face, and back by 11. I didn't expect anyone else to be awake yet, but as I reached for the kettle, I heard footsteps behind me. Morning, Malik said, his voice still heavy with sleep. His hair was tousled, and he wore a faded gray t-shirt that looked like it had seen a dozen sleepovers. Morning, I replied, a bit surprised. You're up early. He rubbed the back of his neck and gave a half smile. Habit, I guess. I usually open at the hardware store on Saturdays. I poured water into the kettle and motioned toward the coffee maker. Want a cup? Definitely. He moved to the counter, and for a moment, we stood side by side, in comfortable silence, the kitchen humming, with a low gurgle of brewing coffee. I handed him a mug, and he nodded his thanks, taking a slow sip. We talked easily about his classes, the robotics club, his part-time job. I learned he'd recently been promoted to team lead at the hardware store and was saving up for a used car. His eyes lit up when he talked about engineering, about building something real with his hands. I listened. And not just out of politeness, I really listened. There was a calm to Malik, a quiet maturity that felt grounding. I couldn't remember the last time someone looked me in the eye and spoke with such focus, without checking a phone, without cutting the conversation short. You've grown up a lot, I said before I could stop myself. He chuckled, taking another sip. I hope so. It shows, I added softly. He didn't say anything right away, just smiled, not a boyish grin this time, but something gentler, warmer. And suddenly, I realized how long it had been since I'd been part of a morning like this, just quiet conversation over coffee. No one rushing out the door. No to-do list hanging over my head. No distance in the air. No silence between words. When my husband and I spoke these days, it was mostly schedules, groceries, bills. Silence filled in the rest. But this felt easy, light, seen. I looked over at Malik as he leaned casually against the counter, both hands cradling his mug. There was a calm in his posture, something confident but not cocky. He wasn't the same boy who used to sneak chips into his backpack when he thought I wasn't looking. He caught my gaze and raised an eyebrow. What? I blinked. Nothing, I said, brushing hair from my face. Just, you really love what you're doing, don't you? He nodded. Yeah, I do. Feels good to build something. Makes me feel like I'm headed somewhere you know I did know. Or at least I remembered what it felt like. Later that morning, I started sorting laundry in the hallway when I heard the vacuum humming in the living room. That was odd. I hadn't started it. When I stepped around the corner, I found Malik pushing the vacuum with slow, methodical strokes. He was focused earbuds and shirt slightly wrinkled from sleep. It caught me off guard. "You're cleaning?" I asked, half laughing. He paused, pulled out one earbud. Figured I'd help. "Ryan said you've been juggling a lot lately." I smiled. "That's thoughtful, Malik." "Thank you." "It's nothing," he said. "You've always taken care of me. This is the least I can do." There was a softness in his voice that caught me, gentle, almost reverent. I busied myself with folding towels, trying not to read into anything. But I noticed the little things. The way he wiped down the coffee table, carefully lined the pillows just right. How he didn't do it quickly, like a chore, but intentionally with attention, as if it mattered to him. By the time he finished, the living room looked better than it had in weeks. "You didn't have to do all that I said," as he stepped into the kitchen. "I wanted to," he replied, leaning slightly against the counter, his mug in hand again. "You deserve a break once in a while." There it was again, that tone. Not flirtatious, not bold, just kind, sincere. But it wrapped around my ribs in a way I hadn't expected. I turned toward the stove. "Hungry? I can make something quick." "Sure," he said, sliding onto the stool near the island. "Whatever you make always tastes better anyway." We chatted while I cracked eggs and buttered toast. He told me about his favorite movies, growing up, his mom's obsession with sci-fi, and how this house, our house, had always felt like a second home to him. "You were always so welcoming," he said, his voice softer now. "I don't think I ever thanked you for that." "You don't need to," I said, avoiding his eyes. "You're family." He held my gaze for a beat too long before nodding slowly. "Still, it meant more than you know." My heart picked up, and I turned back to the stove, quickly flipping the eggs with more force than needed. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. After we ate, I suggested some fresh air, hoping movement might clear the air in more ways than one. The day had brightened, the clouds had cleared, and the backyard glowed under early autumn sunlight. We ended up in the garden. I handed Malik a small shovel, and we pulled weeds together side by side. For a while, it was just the soft scrape of metal against soil and the occasional chirp of birds in the trees. At one point, I stood up to stretch, wiping my brow with the back of my hand. When I looked down, I caught him watching me. What I said, trying to keep my tone light. He blinked, looked away quickly. "Nothing," he murmured. You look happy out here." I laughed a little, brushing dirt from my palms. It's hard not to be on a day like this. But my smile lingered just a second too long. And so did his gaze. And that was when I felt it. The shift. Not big, not loud, but unmistakable. Sunday came with gray skies and a soft drizzle. Ryan had left early for a soccer tournament out of town. My husband, as usual, had been called into work last minute. That left just me and Malik. I hadn't planned much for the day. Maybe laundry. Maybe sorting the attic, a task I'd avoided for over a year. After breakfast, I stood at the foot of the attic stairs, hesitating. "I'm finally doing it," I called half-jokingly. "If you don't hear from me in an hour, send help." Malik, finishing his coffee, smiled. "Want company?" I paused, then nodded. "Sure." The attic was musty, filled with the scent of cardboard dust and time. Boxes stacked like silent memories. Photo albums, Christmas lights, baby clothes, and faded bins. It was a time capsule of who we used to be. We worked side by side, pulling things down, making piles, keep, donate, toss. At one point, Malik opened a small shoebox filled with old Polaroids. "Is this you?" he asked, holding one up. I glanced over. I was 22 in the photo wide, smile, windblown hair, standing in front of a mural I once painted in college. I laughed. Wow, that was a lifetime ago. You looked happy, he said quietly. I was. Young, stubborn, full of ideas. You were beautiful, he added. His voice wasn't teasing. It wasn't flirty. It was sincere, steady. I looked up. He was still holding the photo, his eyes locked with mine. And suddenly the attic felt smaller, the air heavier. We both reached for a box at the same time. Our hands touched. I meant to pull mine away, but I didn't. Not right away. His fingers were warm still. He looked at me again. There was something unspoken in his eyes, something I didn't know how to handle. Mrs. Carter, he said softly, almost like a breath. I froze. I know this is wrong, he continued. I know I'm just me, but I can't stop thinking about you. The way you listen, the way you see people, the way you've always seen me. My heart thudded. I couldn't speak. He stepped closer just slightly, but I felt it. The air crackled. Jamal, I whispered, then caught myself. Malik. He flinched at my correction. For a moment, neither of us moved. We can't, I said finally. My voice was quiet but firm. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry. I needed you to know. Then he let go of my hand. The silence between us felt thick, like dust that had never settled. Malik took a step back. I should probably go get some air. I nodded. He turned and left the attic, and I stood there alone with the photo still in my hand. My fingers were trembling. I stayed up in the attic for a few more minutes, pretending to sort through another box. But really, I just needed a moment to breathe. My heart hadn't stopped pounding since Malik left. When I finally came downstairs, the house felt impossibly still. No laughter, no footsteps, just the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Malik's duffel bag was gone. I didn't see him on the porch, not in the backyard. He had left quietly, without a word. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the half-empty coffee mug he'd left behind. My fingers traced the rim absent-mindedly. There were no words for what had just happened, no neat label for that kind of moment. It wasn't love. It wasn't lust. It wasn't something I wanted, but it wasn't nothing either. It was something in between, a quiet collision of unmet needs and unspoken feelings. And I hated how easy it was to feel something again. Not because it was Malik, but because it had been so long. So long since someone looked at me like I mattered. So long since someone listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. My marriage wasn't broken. It was intact in the way that a house is intact, even if all the lights have gone out. My husband was a good man, a busy one, kind in his way, but distant, tired, always tired. And I had grown used to the distance, learned to accept that some things fade over time, attention, affection, touch. But what I hadn't expected was how fast it could all come rushing back. From one conversation, one look, one almost moment. And maybe that was what scared me most. That there was still a part of me buried beneath years of dishes, deadlines, and dutiful smiles that could still be stirred awake. I didn't regret stopping things, but I would be lying if I said I didn't feel something, a strange kind of grief, a quiet longing. And beneath it all, a whisper I couldn't quite silence. You're still here. You still feel. You still exist. That afternoon, I cleaned the attic by myself. I threw out the shoebox, but I kept the photo. That night, I went to bed early. The house was quiet again, not in the peaceful way it had been the night before, but in that kind of stillness that follows after something important has happened, something no one talks about. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the ceiling fan above me, the only sound. I thought about Malik, about the attic, about the way his hand had felt when it touched mine, not inappropriate, not aggressive, just present, and about what it meant. I didn't want him, not in that way, but I wanted something. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be remembered as more than the one who cooked, folded, arranged, waited. And for a brief moment, I had been. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I'd been honest with myself. We spend so much of our lives performing for our children, our spouses, our neighbors, our roles. We give, we hold it all together. We don't complain. And sometimes we forget what it feels like to simply feel. That weekend reminded me that I was still a woman, not just a wife, not just a mother, not just a name on a grocery list or a whisper behind a closed door. It reminded me that being seen, truly seen, is one of the deepest human needs we have. I don't know if Malik will come back. I don't know if I'll ever talk to him about what happened. But I do know this. I will remember that weekend not for what almost happened, but for what it showed me about myself. That I'm still here. That I still matter. That I still feel. Have you ever been reminded quietly, unexpectedly, that you're still alive in ways you forgot? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this story stirred something in you, like it did in me, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need this quiet reminder you still matter.